lecture, my presentation is based on Robert Louis Stevenson, of course, but I'm a history major with an art graduate degree, and so my two loves in life are history and art, and my children, of course, but I love to connect things, and so when you're a historian like myself and an enthusiast of art, the great joy is to connect things and to share what I find with my audiences. So I love finding, like today I was reading Mark Twain's notes on when he met Robert Louis Stevenson, because I was looking at Helen Keller's letter, which I'm going to read to you, who was a very good friend of Mark Twain. So it's the connectivity of people, and that people don't create, including Robert Louis Stevenson or anyone else, in vacuums. They create because of who they're associated with and what they also have read and their legacies, and artists and writers around them that encourage them. So I find that fascinating, and so it's this connectivity. As I said, I lecture about Christmas. I find it absolutely inspiring that we celebrate Christmas that was an invention of the 3rd century of the Roman Empire. I mean, I think that's phenomenal. That even before the Romans were doing it, the way the Christian Romans were doing it, Saturnalia with the pagans was this whole festival. We do many things that they did then too. So I find that really reassuring, that you can draw threads through culture, through centuries and centuries, and we share this past. I think it's very important to not only do that, but also to visit museums and to keep the past alive, because we have so much to gain from doing that as this tapestry of culture. So let's start tonight with our presentation. As you all know, here we go. So Robert Louis Stevenson, I picked this painting because it's a little bit more obscure possibly than some of the ones. This is Sargent, and there he is, and his wife is the figure over on the right. Born in Scotland and dies in Samoa, as you all know, at a very young age, very tragically. So he was suffered his whole life with lung issues and health issues and very compromised health. Okay. His wife, you all, I'm sure, are familiar with. Interesting how she was able to really help secure his legacy and his fame and his readership after his death. I think that's really a credit to her. I think it's always good to remember how these people didn't fade away, that their writing was kept alive and vibrant. Okay. So children's literature, as I mentioned, have always loved Robert Louis Stevenson's poems for children, and I've spent the last 12 years of my life speaking around the country on "'Twas Night Before Christmas," the most famous poem ever written in the English language, including all of Shakespeare. It was written in Manhattan in 1822 and published in 1823. It's been translated into every major language, including Yiddish, and it is known globally. It also created the Santa Claus that we know in America today, and the whole idea of Santa Claus and the reindeer on Christmas Eve, which was practiced by many, many people around the world. So I was going to just start with this poem by Robert Louis Stevenson, which is called Picture Books in Winter. And I think I'm going to quote from some of this work tonight, and I'd ask you to go and look it up online and read it in full, because we'd be here all evening. We'd be here till 10 o'clock tonight if I read everything. But so I'll just quote from some of these things, and then if you love what I'm reading, I would really encourage you to look it up yourselves. So, Picture Books in Winter by Robert Louis Stevenson. Summer fading, winter comes, frosty mornings, tingling thumbs, windows, robins, winter rooks, and the picture storybooks. Water now is turned to stone, nurse and I can walk upon, still we find the flowing brooks in the picture storybooks. All the pretty things put by, wait upon the children's eye, sheep and shepherds, trees and crooks in the picture storybooks. We may see how all things are, seas and cities near and far, and the flying fairies looks in the picture stories books. How am I to sing your praise, happy chimneys, corner days, sitting safe in nursery nooks, reading picture storybooks? Oh. It was lovely, wasn't it? Okay, next slide. Thanks. So Robert Louis Stevenson was advantaged by living in an age of publishing and book production called the Golden Age of illustration in America, and it flurried between 1870 and 1920. What happened was, after the Civil War, there was an enormous interest in publishing because we had railroads all over the place that could distribute books. Before that, books were running around the country in stagecoaches. You can only imagine how few were distributed. And so when you have this golden age happen because of railroads, you have newspapers and magazines and all of these things come upon the public. And it's this wonderful era because you also have color printing brought to America by Louis Prang, and you have this flurry of illustrators. Gertrude Kay, who I just gave this illustrated book that I just gave out, is one of the best. N.C. Wyatt, Jessie Willcott Smith. This is Jessie Willcott Smith from 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, 1912. So this whole era is really what got all these wonderful books distributed to people and made a lot of writers and illustrators very famous and also very wealthy. So it was an incredible era. You have, after the Civil War, you had everybody wanting to go home and have Christmas. It's really what started Christmas in America was the end of the Civil War. It didn't start in the 1820s. It took until the end of the Civil War for people to really develop Christmas the way we know it, with Christmas trees, with presents for everybody, and Christmas cards came in, all these things. So it was really post-war. And it's really fascinating to study cultural history because it's really the sentiment of people wanting to go home. It's why we had Thanksgiving at this time. We had Sarah Hale, the editor of Gaudi's, write to Lincoln 14, 15 times saying, can we please have Thanksgiving as a national holiday after the Civil War? And he does. And then they bring in National Christmas, the same thing. So at this time, you had a magazine produced called St. Nicholas Magazine. It was produced and edited by Mary Beadle Dodge, and she published Robert Louis Stevenson. She also published F. Scott Fitzgerald. She published Kipling for the first time, all kinds of writers, and everybody read St. Nicholas Magazine, and it was distributed by train. So you had, it all coming together. So it's a really fascinating period in time. And again, if you collect books, these are some of the most beautiful illustrated books ever produced. Really stunning. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So wintertime. This is Jessie Willcott Smith. Jessie Willcott Smith was an incredibly famous illustrator at the time. She did every single cover for Good Housekeeping magazine for 30 years. She was a millionaire. She went to Europe and died at a young age, prematurely, but she had a very, very illustrious career. And I found it really fascinating how many women were in illustration at the time. Women had been the ones who were hired to do all the hand tinting in newspapers before we had color printing. And so they were primed to be illustrators, and it became an acceptable career for a woman to be an illustrator. And so you had the rise of Gertrude Kay, Jessie Willcott Smith, all these other people. So just a little history of who this is. I like to always talk about art when I use it in a presentation to illustrate literature. So Wintertime is another poem that Robert Louis Stevenson wrote. So I'll read this to you. Okay. Late lies the wintry sun abed, a frosty, fiery sleepyhead. Blinks but an hour or two, and then a blood-red orange sets again. Before the stars have left the skies, at morning in the dark I rise, and shivering in my nakedness, by the cold candle bathe and dress. Close by the jolly fire I sit, to warm my frozen bones a bit, or with a reindeer sled explore the coldest countries round the door. When to go out my nurse doth wrap me in my comforter and cap. The cold wind burns my face and blows its frosty pepper up my nose. Black are my steps on silver sod, thick blows my frosty breath abroad, and tree and house and hill and lake are frosted like a wedding cake. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. So the Christmas sermon, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you read the entire thing. It's quite lengthy. I'm not going to read the whole thing tonight. It was written in 1887 by Robert Louis Stevenson, and it's really beautiful. It's especially beautiful part where he actually quotes another writer's stunningly beautiful piece about death. I actually noted it down for myself to possibly use in other circumstances, but it's a very beautiful piece of writing. And I found it really interesting. I looked up a little bit more information about it, and he actually wrote this when he was staying at Serra Lake up in the Adirondacks, and he writes this there when he's staying there in 1887. And there's quite a bit written by Mark Twain about when he meets Robert Louis Stevenson in Hartford, in Connecticut, where Mark Twain lives, about all of Robert Louis' writing. So I was reading all that today. It was really, really interesting. So if you're interested in this is the connectivity that I find so fascinating. If you do Robert Louis Stevenson and then you Google people like Mark Twain or Henry Van Dyke or anybody else and see who knew each other, who was talking about each other, or whose writing does one admire, because Mark Twain and Robert Louis Stevenson both admire each other's work. So it's just very interesting. Dickens particularly is interesting to sort of see his influences and everything else, but that's another lecture. So I'm just going to quote this a little bit from the sermon, because I do think it's probably the most famous piece of this sermon. I'm sure you've all heard it. To be honest, to be kind, to earn a little, and to spend a little less, to make upon the whole a family happier for his presence, to renounce when that shall be necessary and not be embittered, to keep a few friends, but these without calculation, above all, and on the same grim condition to keep friends with himself. Here is a task for all that a man has of fortitude and delicacy. He has an ambitious soul who would ask more. He has a hopeful spirit who should look in such an enterprise to be successful. There is indeed one element in human destiny that cannot blind as itself, can controvert. Whatever else we are intended to do, we are not intended to succeed. Failure is the fate allotted. It is so in every art and study. It is so above all in the continent art of living well. Here is a pleasant thought for the year's end or for the end of life. Only self-deception will be satisfied, and there need be no despair for the despair. Excuse me. So he wrote this on his way. He was at a sanatorium, a tuberculosis sanatorium up in the Adirondacks, trying to get well from being sick. And this is a whole sort of contemplation of life and death. Very, very beautiful. It's called The Christmas Sermon. So I highly recommend you read it. It's a lovely piece of writing. Okay. So Christmas at Sea. This is a beautiful poem. Again, I highly recommend you read the entire poem. I did want to read a little bit of it too for you, because it is really quite stunning. I'll start with this. We gave the south a wider berth, for there the tide race roared, and every tack we made we brought the north head close abound. So we saw the cliffs and howes and the breakers running high, and the coast guard in his garden, and his glass against his eye. The frost was on the village roofs, as white as ocean foam. The good red fires were burning bright in every longshore home. The windows sparkled clear, and the chimneys volleyed out, and I vow we sniffed the victuals as the vessel went about. The bells upon the church were rung with a mighty jovial cheer, for it's just that I should tell you now of all the days in the year. This day of our adversity was blessed Christmas morn, and the house above the coast guards was the house where I was born. So it's just a lovely, they're at sea and it's really rough and it's Christmas, and it's just a lovely piece of writing. So, as I was mentioning about Christmas, the Civil War, of course, the end of the Civil War brings about this huge, huge interest in just going home, having family time, celebrating with friends and family, just getting past the horrors of what had happened. By the 1880s, you have Thomas Nast, who had started in 1863 with Harper's. And he comes along and he does Santa Claus like no one's ever done it. Very prolific, all kinds of portraits and images. He brings in the whole concept of the spyglass looking at children, the idea of keeping lists on naughty or nice, and it just really takes off. He's very good friends with President Theodore Roosevelt, and he is very, very, very influential on the development of Christmas in America for a very long time. And what I find really fascinating about Nast is that he brings back the concept of naughty or nice. We lost that in 1822 with "Twasn't It for Christmas." It is a reason that "Twasn't It for Christmas" has survived so long is because it's jovial and nice and merry, and no one's being threatened, and no one's being punished, and there's no division of naughty or nice. It comes back in at about the 1880s through the artwork of Thomas Nast. And it changes everything, I think. And I'm a very big proponent of not doing the naughty or nice, because I don't think children need that. I think children, I think they self-regulate a lot, and I think that they just need to think that this is a lovely, jovial character who will bring them something and be joyful and happy. So it's always fascinating to me. I hang out with the Santa Claus community in the year. There's thousands of Santa Clauses who are a fraternity that do very good works all over the country all year long, raising funds for children. And I always like to share this little story that I was talking to a Santa Claus about all of this, and he said that he had a little boy come and sit on his lap, and he said, have you been naughty or nice? And the little boy had a complete meltdown, freak out, and said, I don't know, Mom, have I been naughty or nice? I don't even know. And he started having this, panic attack. So we can all take lessons and maybe not do the naughty or nice thing. So I'm going to read something else that I think is a really wonderful piece of writing. This is by Henry Van Dyke. He did not know Robert Louis Stevenson, but this is the same year as the Christmas sermon, so the same era. So I'm going to read this to you. And I think this is a really lovely piece. I think that, if you go look it up online, it's easy to find. It's something that if you're looking for something to share with people over this next couple of days or Christmas, this might be something that you'd like to share with them. So it's called Keeping Christmas by Henry Van Dyke, okay? There is a better thing than the observance of Christmas Day, and that is keeping Christmas. Are you willing to forget what you have done for others, and to remember what other people have done for you? To ignore what the world owes you, and to think what you owe the world? To admit that the only good reason for your existence is not what you are going to get out of life, but what you are going to give to life? Are you willing to stoop down and consider the needs and desires of little children? To remember the weakness and loneliness of people who are growing old? To stop asking how much your friends like you and ask yourself whether you love them enough? To try to understand what those who live in the same house with you really want, without waiting for them to tell you? To make a grave for your ugly thoughts and a garden for your kindly feelings, with the gate open? Are you willing to do these things even for a day? Then you can keep Christmas. I think it's lovely, and it's kind of in the vein of Robert Louis Stevenson. I think he would have liked this as well. So I found that not long ago, and it's been forgotten. Like so many different pieces of literature that were once very, very popular, they've sort of been lost. And I think that it's sort of lovely to go back and find some of these works and sort of bring them back into a reading at Christmas. I mean, many families will get together and read "Twasn't It for Christmas." Many people get together and watch Christmas Carol, or maybe read it. But I think there's a whole, body of literature that needs to be remembered and maybe brought back and shared again. There's wonderful things, and it's been a real joy of mine to go and find them all. I just finished writing a book about Mrs. Claus, and I found 20 stories in the 1860s about her being a major suffrage, icon. And then we've lost some of these things, and so it's really a joy to find them again. Okay. So this is something I really found fascinating. I spent the summer researching Libby Custer. I didn't know anything about the Custers, George Custer and Libby Custer, and I wanted to read her writing because Mark Twain and Walt Whitman and Henry James thought she was a really great writer. And so after Custer dies, a little bighorn, she becomes the first professional widow. And after the Civil War, she goes off with him, as you know, in the frontier. But when he dies, she becomes the first professional widow, in that she wrote to preserve his memory in her way, and also to write of their lives before his death. And there's 3 books she's written, and Mark Twain had her published because he thought she was such a great writer. And so I went and I read all of her books this summer. I spent spent the entire summer researching the Custards and researching her. And you're going to wonder how I got onto this, but believe it or not, General George Custer dressed up on Christmas as Santa Claus. So when I read that, I went, oh boy. So I went and read all about their Christmases and the Dakotas and everything. And it's her book called Boots and Saddles. I highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal book. It's beautifully written. It's hauntingly beautifully written. And she knew Robert Louis Stevenson. And what's really interesting is that when he was up in the Adirondacks, she was there as well. She may have been there because of Mark Twain and him wanting her to meet Robert Louis Stevenson. But they go for dinner together. And it's winter, it's not Christmas, but it's winter time, and he's up there trying to get well, and she's there. And there's a conversation that they have over dinner, which is really fascinating. So I'm going to read this to you. I just thought this was really interesting. So you should imagine Libby Custer, very, very beautiful woman, and very, very articulate. Her father was a judge, was very well educated, and a great writer. So they're having dinner together, and Mrs. Custer, so she says, "Now why is it, Mr. Stevenson, you never put a real woman in your stories?" Stevenson, with twinkling gravity, "Madam, I have little knowledge of Greek." Mrs. Custer, "But you have some knowledge of women, surely. Why, you have been a married man these 7 years." Stevenson, "With the result, Mrs. Custer, that I have forgotten all the Greek I ever knew." Mrs. Custer, "But the public expects it of you, and the feminine portion demands it. Come, when are we to be introduced to Stevenson women in fiction?" Stevenson, with sudden enthusiasm. She was quite a flirt, so you know, quite something, I think. Mrs. Custer, "I promise you, there shall be a woman in my next book." So this is what happens. She goes on to write, as you all know, multiple books with women characters. So I found that really fun. And it's that connectivity, right, of how did that all come about? But it probably, I think, is the instigation of Mark Twain. Okay. So, as you, I'm sure, are all aware, N.C. Wyeth was one of the most prominent illustrators ever in American illustration. N.C. Wyeth did Treasure Island and Kidnapped and everything else, and he was a very, very prolific artist. He did both commercial work and fine art. He's from Delaware, Brandywine School, and I just, again, spent a lot of time when I was researching, doing my book on the history of Christmas in America. I did a lot of work on N.C. Wyeth because N.C. Wyeth does a great deal of Christmas. His painting called "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" was on the cover of Saturday Evening Post, and he's a very, very prolific, wonderful artist. If you've never been to Chad's Ford to his museum, I certainly would encourage you to go. His studio is still there with the paintings still up, where he was killed in a tragic train accident with his grandchild. And the studio is exactly as it was when he walked out the door.
What city?
In Chad's Ford, Delaware. Brandywine? Yeah. So he, of course, has this great relationship with Robert Louis Stevenson because he illustrated so many of them. And the reason I wanted to bring up him again, too, with N.C. Wyeth, was his role in Christmas. And it's fascinating to me, when I was working on my books, on my project on Christmas, I would pick an artist that I like N.C. Wyeth, and I'd go and see if what they did with Christmas. And it was very hard to find somebody who didn't. So there were people like Andy Warhol, Master of Parrish, which is hard to believe, but he did do Santa Claus. And I was looking into the Wyeths, and I thought, Andy Wyeth is my favorite artist. Christina's World is probably my favorite series of paintings. And I was looking at Andy Wyeth's work, and believe it or not, in Christina's World, you all, I'm sure, are aware of that, there's a red and white stocking hanging on the bedpost. So N.C. Wyeth noted in 1918 that his family carried the illusion of St. Nicholas as far as possible, believing from his own experience as a child that delusionment is a myth, provided the parents could always enter into the fairy spirit of Christmas traditions and become, for a while, children themselves. N.C. Wyeth himself recalls being straddling the roof in the dark morning hours, thumping and stamping, ringing a great loop of bells down the bedroom fireplace chimney, and calling in a rumbling voice, and then quickly sliding down the ladder to take my position next inside the house by the fireplace in the big room. So we actually dressed up and went on the roof, right? Years later, Jamie Wyatt, his grandson, would observe, maybe the Wyatt's great overdoing of Christmas is because it's the one time of the year when we don't have to hide the child, hide our unbounded joy, and we can go screeching around, putting holly everywhere, and hanging spiders, lots of little animals on windowsills, little men, little scenes, toys everywhere, creating this whole world within our own room. So it's kind of fun, to sort of relate to these people too. It's, family people and fathers with children doing all these things. Okay. There's just more of this chat's for. This is Nancy Wyeth again, major talent. One of my favorites. He was going to go on the cover of my book, but I chose a female artist just because I found so many female artists working in the arts at this period that I just thought it was appropriate to do. Okay. So this is a quote, as you all know, the world is so full of so many wonderful things, we should all be as happy as kings. I have repeated this to myself. I cannot tell you how many thousands of times. It is one of my mottos in life, thanks to Robert Louis Stevenson. The world is absolutely full of so many wonderful things, and it's full of light, and you just have to find them. And this few words has just been such an inspiration in my world. I wanted just to finish with Helen Keller because I think Robert Stevenson would really appreciate this. And because he's a writer, and his sentiments and his outlook on the world and life through this quote. Helen Keller, as you all know, had immense challenges in life and went on to be an acclaimed writer, speaker, brilliant woman. And I always like to remember Helen Keller and to mention her because we cannot forget people like Helen Keller. We just can't. They are absolutely inspirations to all of us, or should be. And this is a Christmas letter, and again, I highly recommend you Google this and print it off. It's from the American Foundation for the Blind. It's Helen Keller's Christmas letter. It's in her biography called My Life, and it is absolutely amazing. It's probably my favorite Christmas letter ever written, and I'm just going to read parts of it. What this letter is about, it's about a little girl who learns how to sign read, and she had never experienced Christmas before. She explains what learning language meant to her in a beautiful way. So I'll just read part of it again. I highly recommend you Google it and read it, get the whole, print it off and have it, so it's just so great. Okay, so tell us about your happiest Christmas. Do you say? These words send my thoughts flying back to the time when the word Christmas was first spelt into my hand. I was just beginning to be conscious of myself. Most experience was one splendid bud. After indescribable darkness, silence, and vain longing, the happiness of childhood had flashed upon me. Love had breathed a new life into me, and on that birth of the giver of life to all men, I was a living soul. The Christmases before that, 6 of them, so she was 7 when she learned how to sign read. The Christmases before that date, 6 of them, were blank. Not that I had no gifts, but I could not distinguish them from anything else in that house. I did not know what was mine or what was other people's. I had no wish for anything except food and objects. They were taken from my hands because I might break or spoil them. If the family hid any presents for me, I did not know or care. I was not a child. I was a wayward, elfish little animal with no language but a cry. My dog was only something that got in the way. I did not even realize that I loved anyone or cared for anything. I was nearly 7 years old when my teacher came to me, so my first Christmas came in my 8th year. In memory, it stands out vividly. The jump of bed, waking everybody with a Merry Christmas spell in my hand, a hurried toilet, impatient waiting for others, a flurry of preparation for the family party after breakfast, and my incessant questions about everything. How full the air was of secrets and mysteries. How tantalizing were the odors of gifts hidden away from my prying hands, oranges, candles, pretty new toys. I do not think any child ever plotted more surprises or gave away more secrets or received more thoughtful gifts than I did on that beautiful Christmas day in the land of mockingbirds and roses. I even insisted on giving something to my dog, Belle. I tied on her neck a big Christmas bow that she did not appreciate. She was a setter and very fond of hunting birds. In the afternoon, she skipped off to a private excursion, and when she came back, the bow was a sorry sight. It had been dipped in the creek and was full of birds and sad betrayal. So she goes on to talk about her school and how this little girl, she discovers a little girl in the corner who is poor and doesn't have any toys or presents. And so Helen Keller gives her everything that she has, and she experiences the joy of giving. So it's not a very long letter. It goes on with her, half page, but it's really beautiful. But I think what it sums up is the value of language, the value of literature, and I think it's just a beautiful way, and to appreciate that, the gift of literacy. It's always fascinating to look at historical literacy rates and how few people, really were educated and were able to read. We think of it now as just a given that we all read, but so many people don't have that gift. And I think reading to little children and using Robert Louis Stevenson's poetry in childhood is so important to children's psyche. Huge fan of early reading and sharing books with kids. So I think, what's the next slide? Yeah, this is me. So this is my email address. And as I said, I speak all over the country on Christmas in America and art and history and specific people, but it's the connectivity that I find so fascinating, right? That they all know each other. I just was doing some work on Dickens, and I discovered a really interesting thing that I've written this book on Mrs. Claus, and I just discovered in New Amsterdam, in Manhattan, that Queen Mab came before Santa Claus. The little children in New Amsterdam were waiting for Queen Mab to arrive from Shakespeare, which is really fascinating. And I was doing a lot of work on it, and I just discovered that Shelley, the poet, wrote a poem called Queen Mab, which is about past, present, and future. And Charles Dickens had it in his library. So really interesting, right? So Dickens had all these inspirations around him. So when I read Christmas Carol, it has so much more vibrance for me now because of not only Washington Irving's huge influence on him and Sir Walter Scott, but now I've got this whole Shelley intrigue. How much did Dickens rely on Shelley? It's really interesting. People do not work in vacuums. And so when you connect artists and writers and everybody together, I hope you really enjoyed the Libby Custer piece. I found it really interesting. And I think that it's interesting to compare, or consider Robert Louis Stevenson's wife and Libby Custer as both professional widows who really did a lot to their husband's legacy and popularity and keeping their works alive and creating interest in them. I mean, that's really what I do. My fundamental goal is to keep these stories alive and keep interest. And I spearheaded the bicentennial for Twice Christmas across the country. I got a letter from Joe Biden thanking me. It's on my desk. And I really did a lot, because I think it's a really important poem. It's about dreams and hopes and faith. And I think it's really important in children's psyche to have that. And I think it's really important to have this colorful world of literature that enriches your life, that otherwise it's a black and white world. And literature comes along with these imaginative characters and makes it color. It just makes life so much more vibrant to have creativity. And when everybody sort of says to me, what do you think, the Santa Claus thing, do you believe in Santa Claus? Or I don't know if I go along with this, I go, it's so important to our psyche to have these natural characters that can carry us through. Just like I've had Robert Louis Stevenson with me my whole life, and his words, it's important to have these characters that contribute so much to learning about what love is and what other great qualities and values are through character development. Literature is very important for that. Charlotte's Web, all these different characters. So I encourage you, I'm sure you all do, read to little children, but it's my passion to make sure that these great works from the past carry on, and that we don't forget to read Robert Louis Stevenson to our 4-year-olds. You know, it's really important. They become your friends, these books, and they carry them to the rest of your whole life. You know, and adapt or, you know, adopt them to your own psyche. So, but so anybody who doesn't believe in Santa Claus, I would just say in closing, what's your take on Snoopy? And Snoopy is not just a piece of white fluff with black fluff on him. If you can't get there, Santa Claus and Snoopy and all these great, Winnie the Pooh, all these great characters, right? It's really important. So yes, I do believe in Santa Claus. Definitely, it's important. So let's do questions. What have you got? Any questions? Sorry about my throat, that claw in my throat. Sorry about that. I don't know what that's about. Do you have any questions? Anything at all? Yes.
Have you lectured at any of the Dickens festivals that go on? There's a few in California.
I have.
Okay. Will we see you in Riverside in February?
I was asked to come there. I was.
Oh, well, I hope you can
I was
make it.
supposed to come. I've got to figure out if I can get there. I've got a child. I've got twin adult children. One's pregnant. May.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Dickens. I love watching Alistair Sim, though, I gotta say. Dickens' children, you know, a lot of these writers, if they have children who can help promote their legacy, Dickens does. His great-great-great-grandson runs around doing Dickens' one-man show. It's really good. And he has a great-great-great-granddaughter who's also a writer. And so it's funny. Sometimes people don't have anybody and their legacy kind of falls apart because they don't have anybody to help them.
Well, I asked because they have lectures often at these festivals, and a lecture about Stevenson I think would be very helpful at the festival. So
I'm a huge fan of Washington Irving too. I think people should read Washington Irving for sure. He's forgotten. It's sad because he's the best, but he's got great Christmas stories. And if Charles Dickens said that if there was one person he mused with more than anyone else, it was Charles Dickens, and he carried Knickerbocker around in his pocket until it went, was worn out and had to buy another one. So Dickens was an enormous fan of Washington Irving. If you read Old Christmas and all those stories of Washington Irving's next to Dickens, there are incredible parallels.
yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, really interesting. And then now we've got the Shelley piece. So I'm really on to Dickens at the moment. But it's not critical. It's like just the influences on these people, right? But it's been really interesting to do Christmas, and I think that Twas My Birthday is in solid ground. I think it'll continue on for hundreds of years, mainly because it's read to a child, usually in childhood, and it's usually read at Christmas time by someone they love, and it becomes a tradition to have it read, and so then they read it to their children and then their grandchildren, and so I think it will continue on. The White House last year celebrated the bicentennial with decorating in every single room, and that was a really big thrill. And I nominated Clement Clark to New York Halls of Fame, and they accepted, and the mayor of New York declared it Clement Clark Day. So that was all very fun. So I don't think Twas is in jeopardy. It still makes the top 10 lists of books going out of the library for children at Christmas time. And it's 200 years old. But it's interesting how there's so much competition too. You've got the Grinch, and you've got Elf, Snow Day, and so much competition. But Twas is still enormously popular and important book. Yeah. Any other questions?
I love your work, and I just wanted to mention, have you seen our local barrel trees?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I wanted to make sure you saw it before you left now.
I did, yeah. It's fun being in California. I gotta say, I was in New York and Pennsylvania and snow, and Syracuse with snow, and Ohio and Indiana, and I've been everywhere. And I just want to get to California so badly. Because I don't like being cold. And then I arrived yesterday, and someone said, "Oh, there's severe fog." I went, "What is fog?"
It's not all sunny California.
I know, he said, "I don't think I'll be able to drive there." And I went, "What are you talking about? I'm in California." So it's lovely I got here. Thank you. I really wanted to be here. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.